Now, I had a better idea. The title of Muriel Newman's column on the NZCPR website today is entitled Legitimising Illegal Migration. Muriel, good morning.
Good morning, Leighton.
Now, when do you send this out? Because I'm sitting up in bed this morning at, I don't know, about 4:20 or something like that, and the next thing it popped up at me.
Yes, well, it went out quite late last night. Yes, so I send it out, but it's a very big mailing list, so it takes a few hours for it to churn its way through.
Yeah, I bet it does. It just surprised me, but I was pleased to see it. And I was pleased to see what your column, because it's much more than just your column, but what your column was about. On December 10 and 11, by the way, I raised this about 2 weeks ago. Nobody had heard of it.
No.
Except a very small handful.
Extraordinary, really.
Yeah. On December 10 and 11, New Zealand is expected to attend an intergovernmental conference in Marrakesh, Morocco, to adopt the United Nations Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. Now, the compact, with its 23 objectives, arose out of concerns over the migration crisis in 2015, when more than 1 million illegal migrants arrived in Europe. However, instead of focusing on deterring the unlawful movement of people between countries, the UN Compact legitimizes it by promoting migration as a human right. I understand there are even people on this radio station who are saying, so who could object to that? And you say?
Well, the issue is that at the moment, people who are refugees, for example, and people who are migrating lawfully, they have certain rights. But illegal migrants are deciding for their own particular reason to go somewhere without going through the proper channels. Now, while you could say that everybody has human rights, every human being has got human rights, that what the United Nations is doing is they are trying to make migration a human right so that if you migrate lawfully or unlawfully, it doesn't matter. The host country has got to look after you and give you health and welfare and all those other things. So what they're doing is they are changing the whole way that migration is going to be occurring in the future. And that is really dangerous because many countries are saying it will simply incentivize people not to bother going through the lawful channels because it's quite onerous, but just to decide, I want to go to this country, it looks good there, so off I go. And they're very worried that it's going to destroy boundaries, that it's going to destroy the protocols that have been in place, developed over many years that safeguard people and countries.
All right. Now, from my reading of this a couple of weeks ago, I'm aware that the UN is trying to make it clear that that's not going to happen. That's not what their goal is. Whereas I believe that you and I know, and so do an increasing number of other people know, that that is certainly what will happen. Now, let me ask you a question because I don't know the answer. New Zealand becomes a signatory to this UN document. Somebody gets on a plane on the other side of the world and flies to New Zealand on a whatever they need to get into the country. They get off the plane here and they claim asylum. Is that the way it would or might work?
I think that is the concern, that yes, that is the way that it might work. That instead of being able to say, no, you didn't come here with the proper authorization, therefore, we want you to go back home, they will claim, hang on, this is my human right to migrate. I like your country. I want to stay here. You have to accept me. And I also understood from my reading that it could, in the future, it could mean, for example, that, if you've got a wave of illegal migration going on, like, facing America at the present time, that the United Nations can say to countries, right, well, you have to take, 5,000 of them or 10,000 of them and so on. So it's an incentive, it sounds like, for people to say, I don't like poverty here, I don't like, the government here, whatever, and just decide to go. No. It is a huge concern, and the issue that I rose as well is the fact that they're making climate change one of the factors on which you can claim asylum. And, of course, we know that, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Climate Change, they've talked about New Zealand being a centre for climate change refugees from around the world. And, are they going to sign up so they can open our borders to all these so-called climate change refugees?
All right, I'll tell you what. Have you got time for me to take the break? Because I have to.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll come back to you. It's 8 to 11 now. Muriel Newman from Dr Muriel Newman from NZCPR.com. The American southern border is providing an extremely good example of where things are headed and how this UN compact is likely to affect things. I have put up on my Facebook page, which I don't use much, but I put up on the Facebook page this morning. They put it up for me because I don't know how. A 7-minute video of a reporter in the middle of the migration invasion group when they were in Oaxaca. What is revealed in that video is mind-boggling for most people, because most people seem to think it's just a natural little group of people that just grew because it was a grassroots thing. It's nothing of the sort. It's got loads of money behind it. It's being organised by, tell me if you know this, it's being organised by People Without Borders, which of course is related to George Soros.
Yeah.
Were you aware of that?
No, not the detail. I mean, I'm aware of some of it, and the fact that it looks more organised than I think was reported
There
originally.
are trucks and buses and vans loaded with food and water, and they truck them from place to place. Originally, I don't want to waste time on this actually, but it is, when you see it, and I suggest you have a look at it too, when you see it, if you thought this was just a grassroots organisation, you'll be stunned. Because they're talking to this reporter and telling him what they're doing and how they're doing it. It's extraordinary.
Do you know what the real concern about all of this is, though? And that is that our government, in just a couple of weeks' time, is going to go over and sign New Zealand up to it, and nobody knows about it. I just can't believe it. And what I found in looking, through the rules and regulations about treaties, which this is, was that when it's a binding treaty, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal was, the protocol is that you have to put it to Parliament and it goes to a select committee and the public get to have a say and all the rest of it. And then after that process, the government signs. But because the UN has made this non-binding, even though morally and politically it will be binding, the parties don't have to go through any of that. And I say that's not good enough.
And they've done that intentionally.
That's right. Who knows? But the point is, in some countries, they are putting it to Parliament and putting it to the public, and then they'll sign or not sign. I think that's what should happen here. There should be much more publicity about it, and the government should come clean and tell us what it means for New Zealand, do a cost-benefit analysis, if you like, and tell us what the implications are. And the lead minister is Winston Peters. Now, I have suggested people reading that newsletter that they write to him and ask him, what's the deal? Why haven't we heard about it?
Well, I'll tell you why we haven't heard about it. For the same reason that the mainstream media in America is not covering the real story behind the invasion group. And I now call it an invasion group because that's what it is. And they try to invade by crashing the border. They're not reporting it because they're on board with it. And I would suggest to you that the media here is much the same. Like I said, there are people on this radio station, as I understand it, I'm told, who wonder what the hell is the matter with all this.
Well, I think that people listening to this should find out a little bit more about it and then write to the Prime Minister, write to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and ask them to pull New Zealand out of this deal. I mean, if we have to open our borders to climate change refugees from around the world, people who use that as an excuse to come to our country, we will be swamped. And we have to put a stop to it before it even starts.
Well, as I said, the people organising, the main group organising the American caravan invasion are from People Without Borders. Mm. And that is a worldwide movement, and the UN is behind it. By the way, the UN is involved in... The UN's got people on the ground with that migration group. You'll have a look. You'll be stunned.
I will do.
Anyway, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Muriel. She was sitting in a car. She was driving, so she pulled over and talked with us. More on this after 11.